Hey, I'm Scott Kennedy again, and we're here to talk NFL draft. This time, we're going to talk number 7, lucky number 7, the Detroit Lions. I feel like so many teams are talking about who's moving up, who's moving down, what's going to happen in the 2 or 3 spot. And in the top 10, I feel like the team that's being talked about the least, other than maybe the Jacksonville Jaguars, because they're kind of a foregone conclusion, is the Detroit Lions. And there's so much that they can do with that number 7 spot. Do they address a need? Best player available? We're going to talk all those things with my friend John Maakaron, who runs the Detroit Sports Podcast.com, also alllions.com. His podcast is wildly popular with all Detroit sports, and we'll make sure that you can find him before you get out of here. But I want to bring him in, and I want to talk all these things. I want to talk the big trade. I want to talk Stafford's legacy. How is he thought of in Detroit? They actually have some free agency cap money. No one else seems to. So are they going to be a player in the free agent market? And finally, a 2021 season outlook for the Lions. But let me bring in my friend John real quick. And John Maakaron at Detroit Podcast. You can find him on Twitter. And John, welcome to the show. Appreciate you being on.
Absolutely, Scott. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Always enjoy talking football, and maybe even can get a little bit of jabs in there with your team, Chelsea. Even though they've dismissed and sacked their coach, they're actually playing well, which is funny. It's always a curse. Whenever I want to talk smack about someone's team, they end up performing well. So
you're one of the few people that actually text me during games. So I'm never sure if you're if you're a Chelsea fan, because you're pretty nice about it, but I think we've got enough football fans in our group that I think it's time we need to do something, on a across the pond pod or something like that. But we won't get into Chelsea too much, in this one, because people are here to talk football. They're here to talk Detroit Lions. They're here to talk about what they could do, how it would affect their team. So as we do that, what I want to get into first, though, is the big trade. That was the news earlier, and I guess it finally gets announced formally here next week. Matthew Stafford goes one direction at 33 years old. That was a hefty price to pay for the LA Rams. And then coming in is Jared Goff, young quarterback, not too far removed from a couple of Pro Bowl seasons, and some first round and some picks, including 2 first rounders. So how did that trade go over? If I'm looking at it as a neutral, I think, wow, I'd be pretty happy as a Detroit Lion fan that they pulled that trade off.
Yeah, absolutely. What really was surprising, Scott, was the fact that Matthew Stafford, after really expressing his loyalty, all that he's done in Detroit, when he goes to the organization after the season and says, look, we need to figure out what's next for me. And for him to actually be the driving force of this deal really surprised a lot of people. So, you have 2 new members of the front office come in, and Brad Holmes, and a new head coach, and Dan Campbell, and they've come in already with this kind of information at hand. And so for the Detroit Lions to be able to go out there and actually execute this trade and to get back that return, because that was the next big thing that people were talking about, was going to be, what could the Lions get back for Matthew Stafford, and to be able to, for Brad Holmes to be able to go out and talk to his old team in Les Snead and figure out this deal. Now, I understand that they did have to take on Jared Goff to secure that additional first-round pick, but to secure that much draft capital, 2 first-round picks, and additional capital for Matthew Stafford, it was a grand slam for an incoming regime. And it's unfortunate for Lions supporters, because they did become attached to a player that really was the staple of that team and organization. But for where the Lions need to go moving forward, it was just simply a grand slam.
Well, and I feel like I can say this, talking about Matthew Stafford being the driving force behind this. And as a lifelong Atlanta sports fan, I'm right there with you with the Detroit Lions. I understand heartache, futility, and losing seasons. But I've always said the Lions are the one team that may have had 2 of the best all-time players at their position and never went to a Super Bowl with them. And they left early. This is about the same time that Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson called it quits. So, with him being the driving force behind here, after, paying his dues and being a good Detroit Lion after 8, 9, 10 years, what's his legacy like in Detroit now? Did he hurt it? Is he looked upon fondly? And I would think that the return helps a lot. You're like, hey, you gave us some great years, and we got a possible frontline starter at quarterback, a 3rd-round pick this year, and 2 other number 1s. Thanks, Matt.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. with Matthew Stafford, the joy of covering sports in Detroit was the polarizing nature of this figure because of the fact that he was the best quarterback that many people have seen in generations. So you have a large segment of fans that were simply on board with what this quarterback was doing. And then on the other side, you had an equal and even more passionate fan base that said and looked and evaluated everything and said, where are the wins? Where are the division titles? Where are the big moments? Unfortunately, he developed a nickname, Stat Padford, because the team was always behind and he would always end up seemingly getting big numbers because of the fact that the team was behind. So Matthew Stafford, his legacy in Detroit is of a polarizing figure that did not meet his potential like so many others in regards to the team winning. Now, this player, you got to give him credit because of the fact that after the last few seasons, it has been revealed that he was dealing with a myriad of injuries with his back, with his throwing finger, with his ribs, and he went out there, even appearing in all 16 games in 2020 when seemingly he was battered and beaten. And look, Scott, you got to give him credit. The man has a big arm. He endured a lot. And quite frankly, those supporters that are behind him can always point to the fact that the Lions never really gave him a realistic running game to try and match his skill set. He had talent at wide receiver, Calvin Johnson, Kenny Galladay, but by and large, you were missing that one final piece. It's unfortunate he never really had a running back that could consistently gain 100 yards. He simply didn't have it. But Matthew Stafford, he's polarizing. Absolutely a figure that is a guy that when you bring up his name, a lot of debate's going to follow.
A couple of things here. One, I hear a lot of parallels to Matt Ryan in Atlanta. He's going to go down as statistically the best quarterback that the Atlanta Falcons have ever had. A couple of great receivers. He's had a little more success. I think that Arthur Blank and his team, if you call 28-3, we'll try and forget that. But playing in a Super Bowl and a couple of NFC championships. But I hear a lot there, and I think history is going to be good to Matthew Stafford. I think people will get over some of that. Before we move on here real quick, I actually went to see Matt Stafford down in Texas when he was, and you talk about that arm. I was like, this is a generational type of arm. This was a Brett Favre, John Elway type of arm, and it was apparent early at Highland Park. He was going against Jevon Sneed, and there was about 35,000 in the stands there, and Matt Stafford put on a show. And, then it's history. You know what he's done ever since. But I went down there, over to Texas to watch him play, and had a lot of fun with that. So want to hit a couple comments. There were a bunch of comments coming in. I appreciate you coming in. Steve says, hey, I'm not a soccer fan. Yeah, that's why, Steve. That's why we're going to move on. And this is what you gotta like too, I believe, is if it works out, or if it doesn't work out, Jared Goff, and that's one of the questions I've got. You only are on the hook for 1 year, and then you've got a ton of cap room. So I think that's an excellent point with the mate, because as you said, you have to take on Jared Goff, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you make that trade for 2 first-rounders and a third anyway, don't you?
Yeah, you make that deal all day long because of the fact that general manager Brad Holmes has familiarity. He's seen what you can surround Jared Goff with and have success with. And, how often are you going to be able to acquire a quarterback that has actually played in the big game and that could have some potential if you potentially build around him properly? Just real fast to wrap up Stafford. Now we'll have an opportunity to see what he's about because of the fact that I believe Sean McVay will surround him with a lot of talent. And I think he favored wanting to go to the Rams because he didn't want to be the central figure anymore. He wanted to be part of a team that had a defense, had a running game, had some weapons, working with a new, fresh offensive mind. We'll get a chance to see if the haters were wrong, if he goes out there and works with McVay and actually wins the big game out in a tough division.
He's saying, I don't want to be Dan Marino. I want to be Eli Manning. I don't want to put up all those numbers. I want a couple of rings, and good luck to him. So I want to move on a little bit, and let's talk some draft. Lions there at number 7, and it's so intriguing here. You talk about putting a team on the field, and nobody's picking in the top 10 if they had a great year last year, and Detroit's included. And unfortunately, that trade is a little bit like getting a new car on your 15th birthday. It's not going to pay dividends on in as far as draft picks go until the next couple of years, unless Detroit maybe packages something together. Have you heard anything about them possibly trying to move up, down, or stay at 7?
Yeah, interesting in regards to what the Detroit Lions could do with that spot at number 7. I haven't heard too much whispers or anything like that about them packaging picks together to move up, because of the fact that, look, Scott, right now with where things are at, Brad Holmes has surveyed the landscape and realizes that this team has a lot of needs in a lot of different areas. They're not a young quarterback away. Now, could they potentially package some of that and consider moving up for the likes of a Zach Wilson, Justin Fields? It's possible. I just don't think it's realistic. I think the more realistic play for this organization is to stay at 7 or to trade back. Now, there are teams that could want that quarterback if a Trey Lance, for example, is available, if he does well in his pre-draft workouts and things like that. Maybe a team like Washington or the Steelers or New England comes up and makes the Detroit Lions a fair offer. And what Brad Holmes is doing is excellent. He has been asked in several recent media appearances, hey, what do you guys think about drafting a quarterback at number 7? He's kept all options open. He said, we're going to do our due diligence. But when the Lions let go and decide not to franchise tag Kenny Galladay, you have an obvious need in a couple different places in regards to wide receiver, defensive line, and at linebacker. So if they stay at number 7, I think they're going to make the selection. And I think I'm hearing and kind of believing that they're going to lean more toward drafting an offensive player.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about that. And I feel like some of the bluffing that's going to be going on, the Falcons and Lions are going to be in cahoots on this one, because they're going to want to convince people that Mac Jones and Trey Lance are both on the board at 5 and 7, or that they'll be taken, because you've got the Panthers sitting there at 8 that are going to be desperate for a quarterback. And to get maximum value, if you decide to trade down, you're going to want them to come up and take a quarterback. So we're going to hear a lot. I always say so much about what they don't. Coaches lie so much, they don't call it lying. They call it coach speak. And you're not going to be able to believe a word of anything you hear publicly over the course of the next 6 weeks. But let's get back to the Lions at number 7. I was on alllions.com and I checked out Vito's mock draft on your site. And despite all of the defensive players available, unfortunately, there's not a premier defensive lineman that's there right now, but there's a couple pretty good corners, maybe a linebacker. He had Kyle Pitts, the generational tight end, at number 7. What do you think? That one would surprise me a little bit when you're sitting there as the 32nd ranked defense, not getting pressure, not getting interceptions. Those usually go hand in hand. Do they go best player available here, knowing that this is a long-term project?
Yeah, Scott. And here's why Kyle Pitts is so intriguing. Obviously, the Detroit Lions in their past have invested heavily in the tight end position, taking Eric Ebron and TJ Hawkinson in the first round. So many people would look at that and go, really? Would you draft a tight end? But here's the thing. I had the opportunity in a recent media session to address the fact that Dan Campbell was a former tight end. And I had asked him a simple question in regards to, can you just talk to me about the evolution of the position? When you played, it seemed like the tight ends were more blocking, not so much featured in offenses. And now in the new age NFL with Rob Gronkowski, a player like Kelsey, you realize that these tight ends can be utilized in a lot of different ways to help offenses take the tops off of defenses and to open things up a little bit. And Dan Campbell, the coach that he is, and his willingness to be open, he said that he doesn't view the tight end as a player that just puts his hand in the ground and blocks, that this is considered a big skill position. And so people read into that. And then he went out and described the skill set that he's looking for, which matched up with the skill set of Kyle Pitts. And when you look at his skill set, I think people just get hung up on the fact that there's a TE next to his name. This is a player that's being considered as talented as Calvin Johnson already in his evaluations.
No.
I know that you may not believe that, but this is a player that's getting a lot of hype. Now, of course, I don't think that he's going to be there potentially for the Lions to pick. You're hearing a lot of other mock drafts seeing him being taken as a top 5 selection. So I don't think the Lions, if he's there, will take him because they do have needs at other positions. And I think that they're going to want a player that can come in and really hit the ground running and to perform right away. Kyle Pitts is intriguing, though. If he's selected, I can't wait to see the reaction. I just don't see that taking place.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad pick necessarily. The Lions aren't one player away, and if you can get a piece, something like that, in tight end, to me, I think it's been criminally underused. It's gotten better. I think in the aughts, the 2000s, it disappeared for some reason. The tight end position, the fullback position still hasn't come back, but then the 2010s, I think we're really good to the tight end, and we're seeing that a little bit more. And the way the rules are, I used to say that I never found, when I scouted football players, high school players, I never found tight ends in the South because if you were big and fast, they put you on defense down here. Why would you play defense anymore? You're not allowed to sack the quarterback, cover anybody, or tackle. So those guys are moving to tight end. But let's say we don't go tight end. Let's say Detroit Lions don't go tight end, and they do go defense over here. Corner, linebacker Micah Parsons. I think those are two fairly obvious choices. Or do you do something, maybe, I hate to say it's a reach because you're talking about guys that are in the teens now, and somebody that's 15 for one club might be 5 for another. So do you go Kwity Paye, Gregor Sue, a couple of edge rushers? So, where do you go with that pick if Kyle Pitts is gone, not even an option, we're going defense, where do we go now?
Yeah, you're hoping that Micah Parsons is there, but I think what the supporters and maybe what Brad Holmes would try to do is hopefully trade back to get him in the neighborhood of 12 to 15. I think a lot of people don't value him in terms of his skill set to be a top 10 NFL draft pick. This is a player, though, that's really solid. But the question marks that are going to be there in regards to the fact that he opted out, didn't have a season last year because of the pandemic. So you're going to want to see what he's going to do in these pre-draft workouts. And obviously there's a need. Detroit just recently released Christian Jones, restructured the contract to Jamie Collins. That linebacking core is atrocious at best. So to add a player of his caliber, if you can get him and work a trade between 12 and 15, I think that gets the value that you're looking for. At 7, I could see them definitely doing it. Look, I don't know if the Lions are willing again to draft a cornerback in the first round again because of the fact that it's just a position that takes quite a bit of time to develop. And you do have a couple young, talented cornerbacks that can evolve, and you can address that position, I think, in free agency. So I think Micah Parsons is a name that is right up there, 1A, 1B, with one of those talented wide receivers from Alabama or Jamar Chase. I think it's going to be one of those 4 players. You're looking at Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, or Micah Parsons. I think it's going to be one of those 4.
Okay, and what's nice is they're going to be available. If you're at 7, one of those guys is going to be there, and you'll be able to get some of those. And then this is music to the Denver Broncos' ears because I think they want one of those corners. They want Surtain or Farley, and hoping they don't have to, that nobody else tries and take them. The Earl says, "I see Jalen Waddle in your future." It wouldn't be such a bad thing. He is a hell of a football player. So Earl, we appreciate you jumping in on that one.
Now, Scott, I'm curious your thought, because the debate online is really fascinating in regards to the positional value. Mm-hmm. I think that's what a lot of Lions supporters are concerned about because they've seen the Lions take a cornerback at number 3, a tight end in the top 10. So in your opinion, do you think a wide receiver gives an organization the best positional value at number 7? Because the talk is, I think that I like all the talented wide receivers I see. But
we can have a little fun with this.
Yeah, you hear the pundits and they say, look, if you can scout worth a darn, you can find a player of that caliber in round 3 through 7. And so I think a lot of people are really waging this debate online regarding, is an offensive wide receiver worth it at number 7?
All right, we can have a little fun with this one because this is my daily shot at Thomas Dimitroff, the former general manager of the Atlanta Falcons. Julio Jones is going to go down. This is practice. This is practically rehearsed. I promise you I'm not reading off a script. Julio Jones is going to go down as the greatest Atlanta Falcon of all time. Regardless of position, it doesn't matter. They traded 5 draft picks to go up and get Julio Jones. 3 months after giving up 50 points to the Packers in a playoff game and not forcing them to punt. What? Are you kidding me? So if you can get Julio Jones or Calvin Johnson or, Andre Johnson, somebody like that in the top 10, yes, absolutely. But you don't give up an entire offensive line, defensive line, secondary, nickel package, and all that to go get a receiver when your team's given up 50 points. That was insane. As great as Julio Jones was, and then it came to fruition 2 years later. The Falcons are in the NFC Championship game against the San Francisco 49ers. Julio was absolutely amazing. He had about 220 yards, a couple of touchdowns, and they lose because they can't stop anybody, and they can't run the ball when they have to. So he criminally overpaid, and the reason you don't hear more about that is because they traded those 5 picks to the Browns, who didn't know how to draft anybody. You send those 5 picks to the Steelers or the Patriots, and people talk about, wow, Julio was a good pick, but they really overpaid for him. Yes, they did. So to answer your question, can you take a receiver at 7? Yes, you can. If you get the right one and he's there for a long time, I think it's okay. When you've got other needs like the Detroit Lions, no. I think there's other options for you to do that. And I've said it would be amazingly stupid for the Dolphins to do it at 3. So if they go at 3 and they take a receiver, they're insane because they can go back to 6 or 8 to the Panthers, to who's at 6? The Eagles. Teams looking for quarterbacks, and then they can get Waddle, Smith, Jamar Chase, and probably pick up an extra first-round pick. So that's my take on the receiver. I think it would be okay if the Lions did it if they just absolutely believe they were getting someone, a number 1 for the next 10, 5 to 7, 8 years. I think that's okay, but I think you got to address the defense. And if there's somebody there, you don't necessarily draft a player to fill a need. But if you can get a talented player to fill a need, yes, you do. So that's what I think.
Yeah, I think that the Lions won't go wrong if one of those talented wide receivers are there. A little bit more concerned about the durability of Devonta Smith, based on what we saw in the national title game. But if they can land Waddle or Jamar Chase, I think a lot of pundits believe, and I believe as well, that when you turn on the film, they can definitely be productive. With Anthony Lynn at the helm and former tight end and Dan Campbell, I think they can put to good use a nice young wide receiver. And all signs point to that because of the fact that you don't just move on from a player of the caliber of Kenny Galladay without having potentially one of those top receivers in mind at number 7 if you stay there.
Yeah, if you solidify the lines of scrimmage, the receivers, you can plug and play. If you've got a good quarterback and you give him protection, an NFL quarterback will find receivers. It's not. I hate to say it's not that hard. That sounds really arrogant, but it's so much more important to be able to move to get a 3rd and 2 running the ball or to kill the clock and do all those things. So. Steve points out that this is a good segue. The free agency starts Sunday. They could sign 2 wide receivers. Now, the Lions are one of the few teams that I've looked at that actually have cap room, and they're going to have a lot of cap room coming next year. So they could backload a contract a little bit to the next season and really go after. Who do you think are some of the top free agent targets that they could go after to really help them out?
Yeah, you saw they made a small move. This year, obviously, that cap number going down $15 million is really wild. I can't wait to see how different clubs will address the salary cap being at $182.5 million, down from over $190 million in 2020. The Lions made a small move. They signed Terrell Williams, a player with experience and a tie to new offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn. I just think that they're going to make, in terms of free agent targets, they're going to make small moves this year in regards to players that can be affordable, that can potentially come in on a small short-term deal. And, player maybe like a John Ross from the Bengals, a player that has speed, that has kind of struggled early on in his career. You're not going to see the Lions make a big splash. You're going to see potentially them look to players from the Rams, the Saints, some familiarity. Dan Campbell, forthright, came out and said that it's not that we are not going to widen our net, but we do have a lot of familiarity with teams like the Eagles, the Saints, the Rams, the Chargers, not only because we know what a player brings, but we know what the player doesn't bring. We know all their warts. And in a year where you're going to be, kind of fiscally conservative, I think that they're going to try to find a player that can overproduce, and they're not going to go. It was unfortunate, Allen Robinson got tagged. A lot of fans here in Detroit are looking at Corey Davis with wide eyes, hometown guy. But I just think that they're not, from all indications from the people I talk to, all indications are they're not going to make a big splash. They're going to make medium-sized splashes to fill in a bunch of needs. And because of the fact, too, you let go of Romeo Okwara and Kenny Galladay, there's a value in gaining compensatory picks. And if you go out and make all these signings, you're not going to potentially have an opportunity to get that in 2022. So I think that they're going to be looking for hopefully one or two more compensatory picks. And I just don't think they're going to make a big splash just yet in free agency.
We talked about that with the Jets and Christian Dyer, and just saying that making the step in the right direction will help next year as far as trying to attract free agents, because it's tough. If you're drafted in the top 10, you're not necessarily, if that's where you've earned your way, you're not necessarily an attractive place for free agents. So one more question before I let you go here, and then I'll hit the comments, see if anybody else has anything. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but this has been great tonight. What's outlook? What do you think I don't know if there are any optimistic Detroit Lions fans out there, but a realistic Detroit Lions fan, what are you looking at for 2021? What can we hope for?
Well, Scott, listen, I block off a lot of time. If ever you call, I'll stay here all night, answer any questions you want. I can talk anything. So I appreciate you having me on, as always. It's a fun conversation to go back and forth talking about the Lions. And look, the outlook at this point in time, in terms of wins and losses, is not going to be good. I think many people will be thrilled if they meet their win total from last year. So what people are going to be looking at is, what's the philosophy of Brad Holmes and his draft strategy? Is he aggressive? Is he going to be able to maneuver the draft and gain the value at each position? Because unfortunately, and it cost him his job, Bob Quinn just missed on a lot of picks and high picks. Everyone in Detroit just grips when the second round comes because he missed on so many. Now you do have potential in DeAndre Swift, the tight end, TJ Hawkinson. Now we want to see, how does Jeff Okudah rebound from a tough rookie year? So many people are just going to now want to see the development of some young talent, a cornerback in Amani Oruwariye. How do some of the players that were on the roster respond to a new regime? Because I think something that Dan Campbell had said in one of his media sessions was, we believe that a lot of the players kind of felt like they were thinking too much when he turned on the film. Do you get more out of a Jelani Tavai? Do you get more out of a Tracy Walker in the defensive backfield, a safety that many people believe has talent, but just in Matt Patricia's system that was so complicated, did not translate well on the field? So the outlook, I believe, is with any new regime a little bit brighter than most. But in terms of wins and losses, Dan Campbell secured a 6-year deal, which you don't really hear about too often, for a reason. That's code for 2021 is not going to yield a lot of wins. It's going to be a teardown and a slow rebuild, hopefully with the goal in mind to get this team to consistently contend for the division and win playoff games. You're starting at square one, and I think right now for Detroit in March and April, it's hope season.
And you are rooting against the LA Rams for the next 2 years. It's like,
if you're smart, yes. If you're a smart fan, you root against the Rams to help your draft day.
Top 5 pick, but I want their top 5 pick too. Well, John, I appreciate you joining me tonight. It was as great as always. I didn't expect anything less. And let me put your name back up there again. So anybody watching, and I'll put it in the comments after the fact, just make sure you're finding John Maakaron at Detroit Podcast. He does so much content, and not just with the Detroit Lions. Yeah, you got the Pistons, Tigers, et cetera, Red Wings. Can't forget about hockey, and just make sure you're keeping up with all of his stuff. And we're gonna let you go, and we will do this again soon as we get closer to the draft. So appreciate you coming on,
Scott. Anytime, I appreciate it. Always enjoy talking sports with you.
That was John Maakaron. I think Detroit is going to be a great team to watch as far as the draft intrigue at that number 7 spot, because they can go so many different ways. Do they address that defense? Do they try and move up and down? They've got a lot of draft capital that John mentioned with those extra picks coming in the next few years. They could package something together. Now, before you go, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. That helps out me. It helps out John. It helps out all of us. And tomorrow we're going to be a little early, noon Eastern time. I'm bringing in my friend Brandon Huffman from out west. He's in Seattle. We're going to talk something a little different. We're going to talk Pac-12. We're going to talk about some of the prospects, including Zach Wilson. We always kind of considered BYU as part of the Pac-12 and West Coast. So we're going to talk some Zach Wilson. We're going to talk about USC and UCLA and any players that they might have on and what's going on with them. I moved out of California in 2015, and I don't think UCLA has had a winning season since there. So what's going on? How much has the state's response to COVID in California and Washington affected the Pac-12 and pushed maybe some of the players and hurt some of the development, pushed them south, pushed them east? So I'm interested to see what he has to say about that. But I appreciate everybody joining. We had some good comments and everything tonight. Hit that subscribe button so you know when we're coming on. But tomorrow with Brandon Huffman at noon. Until then, I appreciate you watching.